Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars video. It is I coming at you once again, your favourite galactic hostess, Star Wars Meg. And today we are once again talking about Andor Season 2. Now because I've spent quite a few videos talking about the more serious themes of the show, I thought today for a change we'd do things a bit more in jest and have a bit of fun. There is still a serious undertone to the topic and the theory we're going to be discussing, but it is far more lighthearted. Now if you've been watching my channel since the days of Mando Season 2 or Book of Boba Fett, then you know one of my favourite things to do on this channel is connect the wider Star Wars universe. I love theorising about certain tie-ins between characters, between shows and films, and sometimes that means coming up with crazy, outlandish theories. And the one we're going to be talking about today is one I brought up back in 2022, but because Andor is now finished, and fans are making all kinds of connections to Rogue One, to A New Hope, and there are still question marks about certain characters who survived the show, I wanted to bring this one back and give you an updated view on things, because my feelings about this theory have developed, and we have confirmation that the character in question did survive, so it brings a bit of credibility to it. Like the title of this video suggests, this theory is rather wild, and if I'm being honest with you, I don't see Lucasfilm ever making this connection. But that's why fan theories are so important. Our headcanons are still valid, even if official Star Wars canon doesn't acknowledge certain things. So what am I talking about? The theory goes that Vel from Andor could be the same character as Commander Dassi from the sequel trilogy. Now there are many reasons these two could be the same person. There are surface reasons and deeper reasons, but there are simultaneously a lot of objections and a lot of contradictions. I'm going to assess all of the information and then we'll make an assessment. So let's compare the two. At face value, they have quite a bit in common. They both have similar British accents, they have a similar way of talking, although Dassi is far more reserved, but that can be explained by, time and experience. People change. Maybe Vel did. They share very similar facial features, hair colour, and, not that this matters, but I guess it's important in the context of this theory, they both like women. It's easy to see how Vel could very well become Dassi in the future, whether Dassi is an alias or a change of name. One important issue with this though, is that if they're the same, Vel should be a bit older than Dassi by the time of the sequel trilogy. If Lucasfilm really wanted to do this, they could absolutely find a way to work around it. Maybe say it was a ballpark figure, or just change the age. Now so far you might be thinking, this theory could plausibly work. Both characters were devoted fighters. Vel spent decades fighting the opposition, and as soon as the First Order rose to power, you can imagine her joining forces with Leia and the Resistance. But there's a big problem. When you start scratching the surface of Dassi's origins, there are far too many contradictions with Vel's backstory for this to make sense. For one thing, they both have different homeworlds. Vel is part of the Sartha family. As such, she was raised in opulence and wealth on Chandrila, the same homeworld as Senator Mon Mothma, future leader of the New Republic, her cousin, whereas Dassi's origins are very, very different. Dassi was from Warlenta, a planet that was resistant to joining the New Republic. She was never part of the Rebel Alliance during the original trilogy, and she was only found by Leia in 28 ABY. She wasn't a fighter until 28 years after A New Hope. That means it's almost impossible for them to be the same person. Vel was a rebel from the start. Aldhani, Gorman, Yavin. Not to mention, if they were the same person, when the Resistance formed as an offshoot of the New Republic, why would Vel ever abandon her cousin Mon? Because remember guys, Mon Mothma was the Chancellor of the New Republic, and one of the reasons for the foundation of the Resistance was because the galaxy found out Leia was Darth Vader's daughter. This created an insane political rift within the New Republic. Leia's reputation was damaged. She was effectively forced out of the political mainstream. When the Remnant became the First Order, the New Republic was very complacent. Political paralysis and disputes amongst senators led to demilitarization, and so Leia decided, we have to take action before this becomes a bigger problem. She formed a resistance as a response, and then eventually Dassi joined. I guess you could argue based on Vel's determination, her fighting spirit and everything she'd been through with the rebellion, that she could no longer stand idly by. She could no longer defend her cousins in action. And so in this way it's not too far-fetched to assume she might have joined Leia's resistance, even if she was getting up there in her years. Vel is someone who would die fighting what she stands for. and the political tensions during the age of the First Order would be no exception. In fact, as someone who was fighting the Empire when there wasn't even an alliance yet, her insights in fighting the newly formed First Order would be invaluable to the Resistance. And remember this, most of the information we know about Dassi comes from books like The Last Jedi Visual Guide, which Lucasfilm seems happy to retcon now and then, when it suits them. The on-screen live-action content always takes precedence. Not that Lucasfilm is going to do this, but if they were desperate to make this connection, they could just say that because Vel was wanted due to connections to Mon, she changed her name and fabricated her Resistance backstory. There are avenues to make this work, but to be honest guys, right now I don't see that being the case. Now I will just say I'm not the only fan trying to draw links like this, trying to find Andor characters in the films. In fact, Eckhart's Ladder thinks he found Claire in the original trilogy, to be more specific in The Empire Strikes Back on Echo Base. Once again, big problem my dear friends, we already know who this character is. This is Torin Farr, a comms officer who fought during the Battle of Hoth. She has an extensive Wikipedia entry, and they even made a Black Series action figure of her. This is not Claire. If she was anyone we know, it would be Vel, cause she's also Chandrilan. But no, I don't think these connections match. It might be a case where in a few years or so we get comics or tie-in books that explain where these characters were during the original trilogy, the same way they did for characters from Star Wars Rebels. New Star Wars characters who exist in time periods we know about often have stories which run adjacent but separate to the main saga, instead of there being a deliberate overlap. But I have to wonder, had George Lucas still been in charge of Lucasfilm, and he was the one who created Andor, the same way he did for the special editions, would he have gone back and retconned some of these characters into A New Hope? And to echo a common fan sentiment, whenever these conversations come up, we don't have to know every single footstep that every character ever took. We can use our imaginations, come up with our own headcanons, and just know they were operating in the background of the saga. I do want to see these characters again though. I'm not saying they should veto any possibility of showing us some of those stories, but it doesn't mean they have to go back and retcon everything for new characters to fit. Sometimes it doesn't matter. The only exception to this, I would say, is Yaddle. Because she doesn't appear in Attack of the Clones, I'm happy that Tales of the Jedi went back to explore her fate. There's a big difference between unanswered questions and I suppose presumed survival. Claire and Vel probably continued working for the Rebel Alliance. It's such a shame Tony Gilroy's probably not going to touch Star Wars again for a very long time. There's a strong possibility that might be it, and if we do get these characters again, they might be written and directed in a very different way, if it's someone like Dave Filoni. So if this really is it, then we can speculate all we want, but they might never give us a concrete answer. And for this reason, it might be best to not make any confirmations that they're known characters later on. So my assessment is that Vel and Dassi are two separate characters. How do you guys feel about this? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this one, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and may the Force be with you always.